Hey everybody, welcome back to Marine Repair. Hopefully you guys have been working on your tools and materials assignment to do this Friday, and so make sure you click the turn in button on that one to earn some more marks for this class. I'm going to start our next project today, and what I'm going to be teaching you guys is the basics of welded aluminum boat construction. And welded aluminum boats are really popular on the west coast of Canada and North America for their durability in our rocky waters. So you may have seen some of these in terms of fishing vessels or pleasure craft, and there's a lot of business around the Vancouver Island area of manufacturers that are producing and building amazing world-class welded aluminum boats. My brother happens to be one of them, so he's helped me out a little bit here with some plans for making your own model welded aluminum boat. We're going to take a little bit of a different approach though, because obviously you guys won't be welding. You probably don't have any aluminum at home either, so we're going to be making some adjustments to our project, and we're going to check it out right now. So laid out here are some things that we're going to be using to make a model aluminum boat. Welded aluminum boat. And here's my first design. So we're going to learn a few things about how to put these things together. We're going to do, first of all, a transom design. So the rear of the boat with a dead rise angle that creates a V bottom boat. This will be a planing hull boat. There's a small chine or flat section before the sides, and I'll teach you guys how to form the hull shape and make some sides of the boat as well. There's some internal components to this project, basically a center divider which helps us shape the boat, and a secondary transom up forward that's going to allow our boat to take some shape. Some of the tools you might need to complete this project: well, I'm going to give you guys a PDF of some of the plans. So there's a little bit of layout to do, but it's pretty basic. Some things I'm going to be using: steel ruler for some measuring, X-Acto blade or scissors for cutting. I have a couple layout tools: Sharpie, pencil. If you have access to a set of dividers or a compass, this can be handy for laying out the radius on the front of the bow. Some tape can be used to put the whole project together, or if you have access to a hot glue gun and glue sticks, that's what I'm going to be using to weld my boat together. Of course, you need some materials to make it out of. Here's what I've selected: a beverage container case and a box of Rice Krispies. See what you can find. Amazon boxes work good, maybe some cardboard. You could try this out of other materials if you so choose. All right, time to get started. And so what I'm going to do is begin some of the layout process so I can show you guys how this project works. Okay, I've opened up the boxes. I use my X-Acto blade to cut those open. If you're using an X-Acto knife, please be careful. It is really easy to cut yourself with them, so make sure you let somebody at home know what you are doing. From here, you're going to need to use the PDF files to lay out parts of the pattern of the boat. And I've left some pretty detailed measurements on these things, and as long as you're close, the project will still work. So some notable ones that can be a little bit tricky: figuring out the dead rise angle. That's the angle of the V bottom from our transom. It's supposed to be about 16 degrees. You can always fudge this just a little bit. If you have a protractor at home, you could actually get the measurements correct. So I'm gonna go ahead and start to lay this one out. I'll show a couple of tricks in a second. We're gonna need to make two of these, one for the very back of the boat, right here, and one as a spacer or divider. So it'll be a bulkhead, and if this was a real construction, we'd end up cutting out a lot of this portion later on to make the bottom of the boat. But because we're building a welded model, we'll leave it full size. So we're going to start with that. The other important consideration on this project is our center line template, and that can be seen here all the way down the middle of the boat, and this is going to keep things straight, but it's also going to help create the curve of the hull, particularly on the underside when we go to put this thing together. In my plans, I've made this to be 17 inches long, and this represents the overall length of the boat. This is optional. You can change the length. If it's 17 inches, this will represent a 17-foot long boat. Now, depending on the cardboard you have, you may have to change this measurement a little bit, and I think I will as well, so I'll let you know what I'm doing here. Another tricky part on this one is the bow angle, approximately 54 degrees. Again, this is variable slightly, as is the radius of this curve to create the shape of the hull or the bow. I have 4 3/4 of an inch radius, which I was able to do earlier with my set of dividers. If you don't have any of these tools to do this, take your best guess, make it look something like I have here in this drawing, and the project will still work out for you. We're going to work at cutting these ones out. I'll show you when I'm done, and then we'll move on to looking at creating the hull panels and our sides of the boat before assembly. first step in making the transom is what I've done is I trimmed up some of my cereal box here, so I made a relatively square corner, and then I measured up the height of my transom, which was 3 inches, 3 1/8 of an inch, and I've measured out the lengths as well. So I basically made a rectangle that is going to be the entire shape of this. The next thing I'm going to do here is find the center of my 6 5/8 so that I can measure down to the very bottom and begin the layout of my dead rise angle. If you don't know how to find the half of 6 1/8, it's really easy to do. You actually just take 6, half of 3 divided by 2 is 3, and 5/8 divided by 2 is really easy. You just double the denominator, it'll be 5/16. So we're going to find the middle here at 3 5/16 of an inch simply by measuring all the way along. Of course, I'm trying to hold the camera and do it at the same time. Not the easiest task, but hey, I'm learning. 3 5/16. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Right here is the center. It's a good idea to do this on the top and the bottom so that then you end up with everything nice and straight when you do your layout. All right, there's the first part. Let's continue on. I'll lay a few more out and show you what I get. Okay, to add the dead rise angle, if you don't have a protractor to create the angle, the easiest thing to do after you've drawn your center line is to take a steel rule and draw yourself an approximate 45-degree angle as a bit of a pattern. So I'm just doing that lightly now. If you do this process, we'll have 45 degrees on each side. We want about 16 degrees. So what we're going to do is split this one in half again by bisecting the angle. Again, just roughly is fine. So I'm going to lay my ruler so I can get approximately half of 45. Half of 45 is about 22.5 degrees. So again, I'm doing this fairly roughly. So there's my 22.5 degree dead rise from here to here. I want a little less than that. I want about 16. So I'm going to guess I'm somewhere in here. I'm going to make this match on the other side simply by taking a measurement from the bottom up to this marking that I've made. And if you're close to a 16-degree dead rise angle, you'll be fine. I'm going to draw a construction line out here before I add in my chine, and then the angles for the sides of this thing before I begin to cut it out. Okay, I've added my dead rise angle. They're rough, they're fairly even, they're approximately 16 degrees. My next thing is to make sure that the dead rise, or the flat part of the hull here on the dead rise angle, again 16 degrees, which is variable. We're going to make these 2.5 inches long, so I'm going to measure that from the keel out, and then I'm going to add my chine. And the chine needs to be 3/8 of an inch wide. That's the same as 9 millimeters. And what this is going to do is allow us to connect the corners up at the top of the transom down to the bottom to create that tapered look. If everything lines up correctly, the sides of our transom should be approximately 2.5 inches, and then we'll be ready to cut out our first transom. And we'll use this one as a pattern to cut out the second one, because you're going to need 2 of these things to put the boat together. So I've measured and marked out the length of the V-bottom, 2.5 inches on either side, and I've drawn in my 3/8 chine. The chine should be relatively parallel to the top of the transom. My last step here is to connect the top edge of the transom to the bottom edge of the chine, and that'll give me the taper of the sides, and then we're going to cut this one out. This distance from here to the chine should be approximately 2.5 inches. Again, if you're off a bit, it's not a huge deal. Okay, my transom layout is complete. I'm going to go ahead and cut this one out. I'll show you what I've got, and then I'm going to use it as a pattern to cut out a second one before moving on to laying out and cutting out our center template. We only need one of those, so that one should go a little bit quicker. Here's the cutout of my transom. It turned out fairly well. It's almost a replica of my pattern. Of course, this might be a little harder for you guys to do. It's also the same as the one on my boat, which is nice. I'm gonna use this one to cut out a second one. I'm actually just gonna lay it over top and use it as a pattern, and I'll cut around it for my second transom. Here we go, 2 transoms cut out. These are pretty darn good, and we're gonna move on to making the center line of the boat. We'll talk a little bit more in detail about how some of these angles can change the characteristics of how a boat would actually handle. Again, these plans were made by my brother, and he actually built a real 17-foot welded aluminum boat, and I've been on it. It handles really, really well. Of course, you can change the way it's gonna ride in the water by changing things like the dead rise angle and the size, shape of the chine. Even the height of the sides are all variable in construction of a boat like this. Okay guys, I've moved on to laying out the center template. They make these as well for a real welded aluminum boat to hold everything together while they cut out all the pieces. And the accuracy of these pieces, obviously in the real world, is super important. That's why I'm having you guys attempt some of these little bit of detailed layouts. To get mine started, I did a rectangle that represents the size of mine. I've changed the length. I've made mine 16 inches to represent a 16-foot boat, and that's because of the size of the material or cardboard that I actually have. So I measured down the height that I needed, which was 3 1/8 of an inch, and I did my length just into a rectangle, and now I'm going to start to add my approximate 54-degree bow angle. I'm going to make a small radius that fits into the bottom, and there is a transom angle. I'm going to add this transom angle onto mine, approximately 14 degrees. Again, you can guess a little bit. As long as it looks fairly close, this project will still go together very nicely. I'm going to lay those out now, and I'll show you what I have when I'm finished. Okay, I put on approximate 54-degree bow angle, and then I've set up my dividers and really jankily put on a pencil on here. I've set it to my radius, which was 4 3/4, and I've just randomly positioned it. What I've been looking for is to create an arc going from the bottom of the center line all the way up to where my 54-degree angle is. Again, do the best you can with this. Mine is even not the best. You could freehand it if you wanted to. As long as it ends up with somewhat of a curve, then you will be in good shape. So mine's going to go like this, and I will make this a little smoother when I'm done. But that's kind of the idea here. Let's create my center template. I've also added on my 14-degree angle for the transom. And this is an important part of the boat design as well, considering that this boat is designed for an outboard motor to be bolted on. You can't just have a straight up and down transom. A little bit more on that later. All right, let's cut this one out. Boom, there we go. Center template and 2 transoms ready to go. That's going to create the back of the boat, our center, and then our bulkhead divider to put on the hull. So what we're going to work on next, some pretty easy cutouts. So I'm going to go ahead and get these ones done. You guys can do the same. I'm going to cut out my 2 hull panels, one here and one here. We're going to start these as just rectangles. So they need to be 2.5 inches wide and a fairly long length. The longer the better. I did my boat at 16 inches, so I'm going to try and make these things as long as I can, probably about 21 inches long to have enough length. I'm also going to end up cutting out the sides of the boat. The sides are shown here in black, and they have some curve and shape to them. We're going to end up trimming them up a little bit later on, but to get a pattern ready to go, you're going to create what looks like this. It's going to be kind of a notched shape where we have a front section 4 inches wide, a rear section 2.5 inches wide, with a 9 1/4 inch cutout for a notch. We're going to make 2 of these and 2 of these for each side of the boat. I have a recommendation of about 22 inches or so on here. It's got to be longer than the length of your center template to have enough material to wrap all the way around. So I'm going to use this large box that I have here to cut out those ones, and I'll show you what I have when I'm done, and we'll wrap up this part 1 of this video before we move on to the welding or the assembly of our model boat. All right, I finished cutting out all of my pieces. So I've got transom 1, transom 2, I've got my center template, and then I have made my gunwale sides. So my gunwale sides are right here. You can see my notch is cut out, and they're a little bit longer than it shows on the pattern itself. And this can be useful to make sure that the boat will actually work. So you can see it's longer than my actual template. We'll trim these ones up later during assembly. I also have my 2 rectangular hull pieces, and one thing that I did have to cut out that's not on my plans are 2 narrow strips for the chines. The chines are 3/8 of an inch wide, and so I just cut 2 really long 3/8 wide strips that'll represent the chine, and they can be seen here on the very bottom outside edge of the boat in blue, right where my thumb is. So we'll be modifying these as we put the boat together in the next video. So okay guys, so part 2 will be coming out on assembly soon. So this will give you guys a start on this project. Again, this is something that is marine related. It's going to be able be done by everybody, hopefully, with tools and materials at home, because not everyone has a boat that they can work on at home. And we're going to go over a few principles of design on this planing hull welded aluminum boat. What does the chine do? The differences in the angle of the transom, the differences in the dead rise angle and the bow angle, and how these affect handling characteristics of a boat. You could actually go and build a boat just like this out of 3/16 2/16 aluminum if you had the time, the money, and the tools to do so. Boat this size is going to be about $6,500 to $7,000 just in aluminum materials before layout and cutting it out, just like we've been doing. The only difference is when they cut it out in the real world, they'll cut out all of these hull panels and transoms, usually with a skill saw, just with a wood cutting blade set to a very thin depth, and they can still cut curves and lay it all out. So this is something that maybe you will get involved with in a potential career at some point. But we'll stop here for now and get you guys moving forward on this project. And of course, if you have any questions, comments, concerns, please email me, tcadell@saanachschools.ca, and I'll see if I can help you guys out with that. But in the meantime, have fun with it. It's meant to be fun, and we'll move on and do the assembly or the welding of our welded aluminum boat here coming up pretty quick. All right, guys, we'll see you guys later. Bye.